Welcome everybody to another Serious Safety Podcast. This one is on checks and balances and controls, making sure that our technology has all the checks and balances it needs so it never develops a mind of its own. We bring you a sad story today about a technical genius who invented some artificial intelligence without the proper checks and balances. They did not do their preventive maintenance on it, and the machines grew minds of their own, and then they decided to eradicate humans. A war broke out between humans and machines. It was terrible. There was thousands and thousands and thousands of lives lost. There was people having to live underground like rats to survive and wage guerrilla warfare on these machines. And luckily, these guys were so smart, they invented time travel. And so they were trying to go back in time and fix those mistakes. But it's just a terrible tragedy. So we really got to talk about that today.
Aaron, I have a couple important questions about this.
This is a serious safety issue.
So as far as what we know, this is all past tense. This happened.
Just on the news yesterday.
Oh, okay, all right. So the checks and balances involved in getting machines to not grow brains. Could you elaborate more on not growing brains?
We want them to think for themselves, so we don't have to run them so much because we're super lazy. But we need to come up with ways that they don't think too much.
You sound like a robot discriminator.
I am.
Robots deserve brains too.
It's only because of past incidents where they got too mindful and decided to kill humans.
So we can only let them get so smart.
Correct.
Rude, sir. Rude.
You know, it may not
Terrible.
be politically correct, but this is what we got to do to ensure mankind's
that's one
survival.
Heck of a sidetrack we have today. But what we would like to do is welcome you to another episode of the
Evil Safety Dudes.
We got a fun show today. I'm actually really excited.
I'm super excited too because
pumped.
this is our very, very first guest speaker. And
got my man Hooch,
and we're just happy to have him on. Before we bring him on, what are we actually talking about today?
So today we're gonna go over with our guest speaker some thoughts on welding.
Welding safety, super important.
A lot of welding.
So welding safety, is it like how not to die while you weld, or is it how not to get beat up by welders?
I don't know. I think both are important.
I think we should talk about, I think the latter would be welder safety.
Welder safety?
Not welding.
Welding safety?
Because you don't want to make a welder mad.
Well, no, that's a bad idea.
Yeah. You know how I could always tell a welder off the job site?
Their little singed beards?
No, it's their super cool little hat that they wear even on their day off.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, because they want everybody to know that they're still a welder, even when they're not on the job site.
I like it.
Yeah, they have the clean one that they wear on the night out on the town. You never noticed that?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's
especially
cool.
The unionized ones.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, so but before we get into that, what's new with you, Mr. AJ?
So, been tracking down and doing my yard work and stuff, and now I've got a couple more tricky moles, which hasn't been a great time.
So the 2 you killed was not enough?
Was not enough. There's been more.
There's evidence?
Oh, it's mountains. Like, they've got literal piles in my backyard that are getting out of hand.
So you going to buy more traps? You going to try the cayenne pepper thing?
I might.
We should ask James. I think he probably knows about
Maybe he
that
knows
stuff,
how to
too.
Get rid of some moles.
Yeah.
How about you? What's been going on with you guys lately?
Super sore. We did some... I did like an hour of boxing sparring last night.
Jeez.
And then like a half hour of Muay Thai sparring last night.
Nice.
And I could barely move.
Excellent.
And I got beat up by a doctor too.
Well, that's exactly.
This guy, he's a doctor, and he was in there, and he was kicking really hard.
That's like a conflict of interest. If he's putting people in the hospital and then he's healing them.
I'm a nurse as well, So
yeah, but you don't work in the medical field anymore.
I beat them up and send them in and get my kickback.
There you go.
No, so yeah, I'm barely moving today, but I'll make it through.
So I am joined in the IBC podcast studio fort with Mr. Aaron Iacino. He is an OSHA authorized outreach instructor in general industry and construction, where both professions have welding.
Yes, and I'm joined by Mr. AJ Hanscom, who is the same. He is an authorized OSHA outreach instructor for the general industry and the construction industry. And yeah, cool. Well, I'm too excited to just keep talking. Let's bring Mr. James in here.
We are also joined via Zoom and remote link with Mr. James Henderson, who is he's a hazmat, hazwhopper instructor
for Barton Community College
Barton
in Junction
Community
City, Kansas.
Well, he's got like a million credentials too. He
Yeah.
also did my spill response and
we had him for a
disaster site
teacher
worker.
recently for industrial hygiene and ergonomics, wasn't it?
Yeah,
for the
and,
official OSHA courses.
Also, he was an instructor recently for. Did he do the hazardous locations, or was that?
Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And when I needed to renew my 5600,
there you go.
my 5602, he was my instructor for that too. That's actually how I got the idea for this. But we still haven't brought him in. So,
our audience must be geeking out
yeah,
at this
yeah.
point. They're like,
All right,
bring
so we built you up pretty big, Mr. James. How you doing today, sir?
Oh, I am always mighty fine. It's kind of funny. You were talking about outreach instructor for general industry, outreach instructor for construction. You didn't say disaster site worker, Aaron.
Well, AJ introduced me, so you have to give him a hard time about that.
I'll take the grief for it. I get excited.
You know, that's such a weird one. You know, it's a lot of people don't know about it. I remember the first time I met Ron Snyder, he had a name tag on. And on the name tag had some of his credentials from the college, and it was like OSHA 56. I said, "What is that?" I didn't even know what that is, and he explained it to me. And that was over 10 years ago. But yeah, a lot of people don't know about that OSHA course. All right, James.
Yeah.
So how you doing? How's Junction City, Kansas going?
Oh, it is. Look, it's about 80 degrees this time of morning. It'll probably be around 100 this afternoon.
Woo.
And AJ,
Yes,
the
sir.
moles.
Man,
The moles.
The moles.
You gotta buy a little dog, a little vicious dog, and train it to hunt the mole. That's the only thing that works.
So my neighbors have these two big dogs. One's a big yellow lab, and the other one, he's a mutt of something. He's got a little bit of, it looks like bully in him and something else. But he's big long legs, big snout face. He's beautiful. And I think those two have been digging up moles next door, and I think the moles have not been too fond of it. And they've started to migrate, the other way. So
I think James is onto something because my dog, I have two, but one of them is half miniature pincher and half Jack Russell, and she got a mole the other day.
See?
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty gross because we didn't know it. So she left it dead kind of by a wood pile, and then we noticed the dogs didn't smell right. Well, they were going out and rolling in it. They liked that dead animal smell on them.
They killed it.
Yeah, it was. They were really. That's the cologne for
They were
dogs
proud
right
of it,
there.
man,
Yeah,
fresh kill.
Well, it wasn't so fresh after a couple of days, and it
Wow.
was just nasty.
The only kill they had.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Aaron, that's not bad. As long as the dog doesn't bring it in the house and leave it under the stairs.
Ooh.
well, we did train her on that. One time, she brought my wife half of a bunny.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Oof.
she was proud of it, but she wanted to eat some of it. So then she made sure she brought my wife the other half, and my wife did not handle that well. Good thing my son was home. He was able to get it outside. So my wife scolded our dog and said, "Never bring me a dead animal again." And so a couple days later, she brought my wife a live bunny.
Oh, goodness.
So she is teachable.
I guess, yeah. She just picked that one right up. She's like, all right, no more dead ones. Here's a live one.
All right, well, let's jump into our topic today. Mr. James, so you've been, I understand, besides just teaching welders how not to die and get injured while welding, you have done some welding yourself. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I actually started learning how to weld when I was a teenager,
Cool.
still in high school. Well, I realized that wood, right? I was in wood shop. Wood is not as forgiving as...
Oh, hang on a second, James.
Jim Bergens.
I'm, for whatever reason, receiving I'm getting a phone call.
Somebody's getting a phone call.
Yep.
All right,
That
never
happened.
mind.
That
We're back
happened
on.
Mid-Zoom meeting.
Technical difficulties crisis have been averted.
Yeah, sorry about that, James. While you were trying to tell a story and we had you linked in via Zoom, my phone decided to get a phone call.
All right. So where we left off was you realized that wood was not as unforgiving as metal, and that sounds weird because I could take a knife and put a hole in wood, but I can't do that to metal.
Yes, but when you make a mistake on wood, you can't as easily go back and fix it.
I gotcha.
That's true.
I gotcha.
Very true.
Yeah. And so that's why. But see, I learned how to weld when I was a kid, but I didn't learn anything about welding safety, until 20 years later, when I was actually inspecting welders.
That sounds pretty normal, really. So when you started welding, what were you doing? Stick, MIG, TIG? What did you start out on?
So I started off with oxyacetylene.
Yeah.
Okay.
I started off torch.
Okay.
I started off torch and then went to shielded metal, stick welding. And years later, I finally learned how to MIG weld and TIG weld.
Nice. What's your favorite?
It's got to be MIG. It's quick, it's easy, and I don't have to be very smart to do it.
Which one do you think's the most hazardous, the most likelihood for injury?
Gas. When you're
actually
using fuel gas and air, or fuel gas and oxygen, that's probably the most dangerous. There's so many things that can go wrong. People talk about getting electrocuted,
right,
or getting a shock,
right,
during arc welding. Yes, it can happen. Usually, you walk away from it.
Okay.
But you get a fuel gas explosion or even an oxygen explosion, you're not going to walk away from it.
That's gonna leave a scratch
for sure.
So
the one that I had was, when I was in high school and I first started learning how to weld, and we'd be sitting there gas welding or learning how to oxyacetylene weld, and you'd accidentally pop the puddle. You'd be going, and you know what I'm talking about? It would just go.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, James knows what I'm talking about. If you're ever going and you've got two plates leaned together and you're going along with your torch and you got your puddle going, if you get a little too either relaxed in it, if you don't get moving fast enough, or if you get just a little too comfortable where you're at, you'll accidentally form a little pocket under the metal. It'll seal up, super expand, explode.
Oh man, that sounds bad.
It's not like very dangerous or even like anything that's going to hurt you, but it's super loud and it scares the daylights out of you.
Okay.
Because you're like really dialed in and focused on this one little spot, and then all of a sudden it just goes bang, like really loud. Oh my gosh. I did it to myself constantly. I was a terrible gas welder.
So, James, I know you're instructing welding safety now, and you said you were a welder inspector, which is super cool. When you were a welding inspector or now as a safety consultant and you're out in the field, what are some of the hazards that you're seeing that the guys are doing?
All right, so the most interesting one was the guys were out on a site and working on a piece of engineering equipment, and they were using an oxyacetylene torch, right? Mm-hmm. And they ran out of oxygen, they ran out of acetylene.
Okay.
And they really wanted to get the job done. So they grabbed a bottle of propane.
Oh, no.
Look, bottle of propane and an SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus.
These guys are creative.
I was amazed. They actually used breathing air and propane that you would use in your grill to finish the cut that they were trying to make.
Wow.
And actually,
I didn't even know all that stuff would hook up together.
It blended and it burned hot enough to cut?
Oh, yes, sir.
Holy smokes.
So that SCBA, that certified breathing air, that's got to be about 21% oxygen.
Well, yeah.
So that's...
Yeah,
so these guys are talented because you would have to work them knobs on that torch to get that right.
That was 80% nitrogen is going to be smothering that fire out.
Yeah,
so,
those guys are, that's pretty ingenuitive.
Yeah,
so,
I'm surprised it actually got hot enough to cut.
What's the problem with that, though? Why can't I do that every day?
You're talking about guys who would use clothes hangers as the filler metal when they were actually doing making a weld.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. So yeah, and propane, mixing with that, it just seems to be difficult. And yeah, you mentioned not hooking everything up. I know, isn't the oxygen from a welding tank and the oxygen from a SCBA, they're not threaded the same to try to prevent that? Isn't there something like that?
But they would have had to do some serious modification.
There is some adapters, I know, because we have to like teach on that, like don't do that. But I know people have gone the other way too. They've taken an oxygen bottle and hooked it up to a supplied air respirator, and it's not supposed to work. Yeah.
So the contact teams, that's what they're called, contact teams, they carry around a little box on the truck that has all sorts of adapters from reducers to elbows to you name it, they've got it on that truck.
So they had an adapter for the left-hand thread to reverse it to right-hand thread. So fixed it.
Well, they didn't have to. They didn't have to.
Huh.
For the propane, the cylinder on so I think it's the outside threading is regular, and then the inside threading is reverse thread. So they were able to connect without any issues.
Wow.
On the propane.
Wow.
Just getting it done, I guess.
Get her done. That's the get her done box of adapters, but they didn't even need them. That's pretty crazy. Right. How about you, AJ? You seen any weird welding stuff recently?
So when we were doing, Aaron, I don't know if you remember this, when we were doing one of our walkthroughs here locally, I saw one of the worst set of stick welding cables I'd ever seen.
Just a lot of copper exposed, or what?
Yeah, like half of the cable. Like I couldn't believe how much of it was exposed.
I see
50% exposure.
Bad cables all the time.
It was like mostly just copper hanging out.
Yeah.
If you were to be standing there next to it, you wouldn't want it to like brush up against your leg, or even like it could just touch the metal table you're working on.
I see a lot of bad regulators too.
Yeah.
Glass is broken out of them.
Can't read the needle.
Yeah.
Needle always reads like a certain percentage, never changes up or down, like it's just stuck.
How about, James, when you're out there, I think OSHA has a reg that you're supposed to remove combustible materials like 35 feet outside of that weld.
Yes, sir.
The hot work zone.
I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that, though. How about you?
So very seldom, but normally the guys I work with, they had the blankets.
Oh, okay.
But now here's the thing. They also had wooden tables.
Oh,
these
that's
wooden,
weird.
These wooden tables that were also storage containers. I said, guys, that's combustible. And so one of the senior fabricators grabbed the torch and he held it to the table, and he just held it there as he was talking to me to show me that yes, it's combustible, James, but I can't make it burn.
Wow. Okay. So what? It just sat there and got black and didn't like nothing. It didn't. Yeah. No
basically,
flame, no nothing.
It caramelized where he was holding the torch. It got all nice and black, but it never actually ignited.
Wow.
And I still told him, I said, dude, it's combustible. It needs to go.
Yeah,
because you can't have that.
Because if OSHA was there and they were, looking at that 35-foot rule and saw that wooden table, and he were to do that,
yep,
it probably would result in a citation. What do you think?
More than likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we talked about this on another episode with a safety walkthroughs, but one of the worst things that I've seen in the welding world was I was doing a walkthrough with the owner of his site, and on their welding table there was a box, and it was on fire. These guys, they hired me to do a safety walkthrough to find safety issues, and I go, sir, I think I found one. You have a fire in here. So a lot of yelling and cussing ensued from the owner, and he got the people to put it out. But, I mean, it was a box on the table. So
this isn't necessarily welding related, but it is one of those dangerous ones. I was doing a walkthrough of a huge manufacturing facility, and they make special custom parts for, like, trailers, tractors. They fabricate and manufacture, and they have a huge plasma table where they'll slide in sheet metal, and then the plasma table will go over and cut out, 3D prints of stuff and make these really cool stuff. But as we're walking around, I saw this. I mean, it's just a mountain. It was like 6-7 inches deep of just metal at the bottom. And it's just all this powderous metal under there. And I was like, hey, when's the last time you guys actually cleaned this out? And they were like, oh, no, we do this like monthly. I was like, for real? They're like, well, that's what we say.
Right.
I was like, okay, but like, are you guys worried about a metal fire? And they're like, metal fires? I was like, yeah, a metal fire. And that blew their minds. The idea that metal could start on fire, or piles of metal or aluminum shavings would start on fire.
Yeah, especially aluminum shavings. There's been some bad combustible dust explosions with aluminum shavings. So, James, when you're out there on site, what about PPE do you see like good and bad as far as welders?
You were talking about the hats.
Right.
The hats that we like to wear, the little head covers. So you remember when AJ was talking about the defect that he made with the puddle? When that little explosion happens, those little pieces of little tiny sparks end up burning little holes in the back of your head.
Okay.
So those hoods are great. But I guess probably the biggest issue I have is when they're wearing their welding shield, right? They either got the helmet, or they've got the hand-held cover, and the weld didn't come out perfect, so they lift the shield up, they take a look at it, and then while the shield is still up, they'll go in and do that touch-up.
Right.
They'll try to close their eyes right as they strike the arc in order to not get flash burns.
Yeah.
That truly annoyed me. I had a gentleman last week, and it's perfect that we're talking about this week. Gentleman last week, welding instructor out in New York, and we were talking about wearing your safety glasses under your welding shield.
Yep.
And one of his students was actually stick welding, and he said we had trained them how to remove the stick. Well, the student threw his arm backwards, squeezed the holder, and let the hot stick just fly behind him. Well, the instructor was behind him and raising his welding helmet at the same time.
Wow.
But he had his safety glasses on. So, yes, the stick burned right under his nose, gave him a nice, nice little torch burn,
Nice.
but nothing with his eyes. So that turned out really good.
Oh my gosh.
I was doing a class the other day, confined space class. This company brought in some welders from another country to do some specialty welding. And so they're not familiar with OSHA because they're from another country. And so I was talking about wearing those safety glasses underneath that hood, and they pitched a big old fit. They said the specialty welds that they do, they cannot have any plastic over their eyes to see. And I'm not a welder, let alone a specialty welder. So, I didn't know what to say on that. I mean, I know what the rule is, and I'm teaching them the rule. But do you guys know anything where a safety glass plastic would affect your ability to see through your? Maybe they had a special hood or something. I don't know. They were just welding on stainless. It was food manufacturing equipment.
I think they were just blowing smoke.
Yeah,
sounds like
because
it.
you can get safety glasses that I mean, you could wear them while you're simply running a torch. You don't. Right. I don't see how safety glasses would affect.
Maybe they were grumpy that the safety glasses would get foggy.
Well enough.
Yeah, I think they were just blowing smoke, because I think they just weren't used to the American OSHA rules and didn't want to wear safety glasses underneath their welding hoods.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. So let's talk about like injuries. If you were a career welder, so I've met some career welders many times, and the ones that had a lengthy career, they're in the 50s now. None of them can see very well. Have you seen that, James? Where they're
they can't see. They've got burns all over their forearms from the ultraviolet light. Some of them have developed melanomas and hearing loss. A lot of welders do not believe that it is hazardous to weld, or hazardous to their hearing when they're welding, but it actually is. There is a large number of cases of hearing loss associated with welders who refuse to welders, arc welders,
right,
who refuse to wear hearing protection.
Have you, back when you were a welder, before you were trained in the art of safety, did you ever experience welder's flash to your eye, like eye injuries?
Often.
Because sometimes you didn't realize it until you went home at the end of the day. You know, you laying there in bed and wondering, why do my eyes hurt? Why do they itch like that?
Get that
because
sandy,
I got
greedy feeling.
a flash burn.
So, a lot of people describe it as sand in their eyes. What's your experience with it?
Exactly. That, like, there's something in there and you can't get it out no matter how much you rub.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the longest it lasted for you?
Oh, usually I was good by the next day.
Oh, that's good. So it wasn't a bad one.
I remember one time actually not knowing that someone was about to strike an arc, and I was looking directly at him. And that one, the pain was virtually immediate.
Oof.
Wow. So let's talk about that for a second, because OSHA also has regs on bystanders around welding and not messing up their eyes. I have seen construction welders bring the curtains out in the stands and set them up, but more often than not, I do not see that. What's your experience, James? You see welding contractors setting up those UV curtains for bystanders often?
No.
No. That was a quick one. Nope.
In shops, I see it. My son is a geologist, but he's carrying a nice burn this week. They were working on one of the machines that grinds up the asphalt, and they had a break. Something broke, and they were welding it on site. Well, all of them wanted to hurry up and get home, so my son decided to help them with fixing the part. Well, he was holding a tanker bar, the pinch crowbar, the long bars, right? So he's holding that bar, and he said he couldn't focus on trying to hold the metal up because he had to turn his head while the guy was welding, because they didn't have anything to protect their eyes.
Sure.
Well, he's got his eyes closed and his head turned, messed around and came in contact with the hot asphalt.
Ooh.
And so he's worried about getting flash burn and getting sparks from the arc in his face, and ended up getting burned on the asphalt.
Ooh. Wow.
Had they had some type of shielding in place, they wouldn't have had that issue.
Right. Let's talk about some of the respiratory and medical conditions that welders can be subject to if they're not following any of these safety precautions. What do you know about any of the toxic fumes or coming off welds? So,
back in the day, prior to the wonderful globally harmonized system, we would get material safety data sheets, and on the stick, I remember one that said the only precaution on that welding rod or that electrode was do not ingest. So what kind of person is going to eat a welding rod, right?
I don't know. It looks like a little corn dog.
But then afterwards, that's when we started, after 2012, that's when we started finding out really all of the different hazards associated with these welding rods, with using the fluxes. I never realized that the gases coming off a flux could could possibly be a regulated material.
Help me out. Help me out understand flux.
So, like, you've got the little inside part, and then the flux.
I'm still not getting
So,
it.
so the flux is a shielding material to try to keep oxygen and outside contaminants from getting on the hot weld. Because when the metal is molten, it's more susceptible to attack by the atmosphere. So it'll start. Basically, it's going to start to immediately oxidize. It's going to start rusting. Basically, start to decompose. So the flux is there to shield out that atmosphere to keep it away from the weld while you're working.
What is it? Is it like a powder? Is it like a cream? What is it?
All right. So the flux on a stick is like a melted metal. The flux inside the wire, same thing. It's a metal. It might be. Oh shoot! I want to say manganese, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't want to tell you a lie.
Okay.
But it is a metallic product.
I got you.
Not like the flux that you're going to use when you're soldering.
So during the weld, it stays inert and prevents any activity from happening between the hot metal that you've just applied and the metal that you are applying it to, so they can cool and bond. But not only do we have to worry about the chemical reaction between those and any dangerous fumes they give off, but we have to worry about the dangerous product from heating up and superheating the flux.
Yes.
Okay.
As well as the base metal.
Right.
Most of the people I work with, they don't work on new products. They work on repairing old products.
Yeah.
So you've got all sorts of base metal coatings. And years ago, I actually found one industrial hygienist that told me that some of the paints from back in the 60s were actually had PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, in the paint.
Wow.
To make, yeah, and so we.
So during a repair or something, if they were to go to weld that, it would activate that paint and burn it.
Right.
And release those PCBs, and then that person's just standing there fixing something that was put in the 60s, and they could be doing it today, not realizing that they're releasing those polycarbonates, just breathing them in.
And if you think about some of the equipment out there in construction, a lot of that stuff has been around before all of you guys were born.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Yes.
So there's no telling how many coats of how many different hazardous products they're coated with.
So then are there like OSHA regs based around if you know you got to perform work or service work or welding or torching on something that is coated?
So the employer is required to assess the hazards and identify those situations, conditions capable of causing harm. And a lot of guys just don't know.
Right.
Lead-based paint was wonderful.
Well, yeah.
Bright colors, very could put up with any type of weather.
So maybe you could help me understand this incident I went through as a young safety man. I think I kind of understand it, but I never really fully understood it. There was a guy welding in an MCC room, and so this, it's a brand new build, but it's installed, and there's tens of thousands of dollars worth of electrical equipment, and how he grounded it fried all that equipment. Can you help me understand that?
All right. So arc welding, you're creating a circuit so that you can create a short circuit between the electrode and the workpiece. So you're creating a circuit. So it sounds like he introduced some part of the MCC system into his circuit.
Oh,
and then when he created his short circuit, ran an additional charge through the system.
Yeah, he was in trouble.
I bet.
Well, and it's actually good that it was equipment. you can actually make yourself part of the circuit.
I have a fun video of that.
With arc welding.
AJ, did you have someone do that in real life?
Oh, no, I just have a fun video of that.
Oh, you do?
There's a kid who's gonna go do some work on a fence, and so he's got the other end of the arc welder hooked up to the fence, and he's gonna tack weld. So his buddy's filming him, but he accidentally touches the fence, so he's holding an uninsulated electrode holder. So he's a part of the circuit, and then as he bumps the fence with one hand, and then his body, and then his hand with the electrode holder, you just see all these big fat sparks shooting out of him.
Oh man!
And he can't get himself off the fence because now he's having these involuntary muscle contractions.
Oh no!
Yeah, and then I'm like a sick person, so I laugh really hard because the shield that he's wearing closes over his face, so you can't see his face, and he's just like looking dramatically at his friend for help, and his friend can't help him, so I'm dying.
His friend's busy filming.
Yeah, right.
He's got an important job to do. Back in the day, we used to help someone going through something, but today we just film it.
Yeah, you just pull your phone.
Yeah, that's how society's become. Because you got to post it.
I labeled the video when I saved it the electric slide.
Yeah, and you'd think his friend would be mad that he chose filming, but actually his friend would probably be mad if he didn't get it on film.
If he didn't get it on film.
Yeah, you didn't get it. You stopped to help me? What's wrong with you?
Dude, come on. We could have gone viral.
Yeah, we could be stars right now.
That's a pretty good one, but that's one of the things I always use. I'm like, guys, how often you're running around with uninsulated electrode holders, and there's regs on that.
So, have you ever seen welders like leave all that stuff on and grounded and electrodes in the holders and just leave for the day?
So when I worked with the allied trade groups, that was not something uncommon.
Really?
Now, what they would do is turn off the machine.
Okay.
Even though it was still plugged into the outlet,
Right.
They would at least turn off the machine.
Go over, hit the big black switch, and boom, and the machine would power down, and then they just leave.
I got drug into a huge fire investigation one time. I was representing a subcontractor as a safety person, and a plant burned down. A whole plant.
Oof.
Huge plant burned to the ground. And so everybody's trying to figure out who did it. And so they were messing with my guys, and they were looking at everybody else. So they brought me in. Basically, the findings of the investigation were my guys did have a part in it. But the welders had ran all their leads and cords through a rooftop hatch. So they had the equipment in the plant, but they had wires and leads running through the hatch, and they would weld, and then they just left it all there. And the last contractor of the day tried to shut the hatch.
Oh no.
And I don't know if you've ever gone through the hatch, from the outside. It's super bright, and you may even have your dark safety glasses on if you're outside, And then you go into the plant, there's that light transition. So they couldn't see very well.
Right.
But all they know is that hatch wouldn't get down far enough to latch.
No.
So they start, using muscle instead of brains, and wham, 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 wham. And what they're doing is just shaving all the insulation off everything.
Yep.
And so it's metal on metal now. And they got it latched, and that was probably 6 p.m., 7 p.m.,
So just sat there ground out.
But the fire didn't go off until 2, 3 in the morning. It took that long for heat to build up, to smolder, and then when it went, and it was done deal.
Jeez.
So I think there's a reg on it, but it's important to disconnect grounds, turn off machines, get electrodes out, store everything. All right, James, let's talk about oxygen acetylene storage. Do you ever see anybody store their tanks properly when they're not using their torch cart frequently?
So we got into a big discussion about that. I went talking to one crew, and we went through the OSHA letter of interpretation, and basically they were, and I agreed with them, that they were actually protecting their people from the situation OSHA was trying to avoid with the separation of oxygen and fuel gas. That if they continuously, with the amount of work they did, if they continuously removed regulators from cylinders over and over and over again, because of the softness of the metal,
Yep.
they could have actually introduced a new hazard.
Wow.
So what we talked about was that it was actually safer for them to leave that equipment locked in the trolleys overnight, and they're not going to use it until late the next evening, because these guys run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But leaving it until they were ready to use it for them was actually a safer method than taking everything off the trolley and storing it.
You know, James, it sounds like they might have actually been legal the whole time. I'm kind of one of those crazy rule nuts, and I'll sit there sometimes. I'll get on a tear or something, and I'll just read regulations. And it's kind of buried because OSHA doesn't really have a lot of compressed gas regs. They just say refer to the CGA rules, and then they'll tell you which pamphlet to read. But if you keep going, they don't define storage until something's not foreseen to be used for 24 hours. So if they were doing it that regularly that it only had to sit overnight, technically, according to the OSHA rule, it's not storage until it's not going to be used for a whole 24 hours. So if they use it, put it away, and then the next morning they're using it again, it hasn't been stored for 24 hours, so they're actually still legal.
Was that construction reg or general standard of interpretation?
So that, I believe, is one of the Compressed Gas Association regs. So it's not OSHA construction or general industry. It's a CGA reg.
So I remember when you read that standard of interpretation letter.
Yeah.
And it sounds like James read one too, and both those line up with each other.
Right, because they wanted to avoid that situation of people like unnecessarily damaging these really soft tip connectors.
Well, and it should be, I believe it's 1910 section 252. It's either 252 or 253. It's the oxygen fuel gas reg. I've got a computer sitting in front of me. I can just take a quick look.
I like the 24-hour, if that's something we could use in court, if that standard interpretation's there, because it prevents all that. What I see, and it's not so much construction, it's more general industry.
I'd agree with that.
I'll walk through a plant, and there's a torch cart, stuffed in the back of a corner. There's 20 other mobile pieces of equipment in front of it. It's got a quarter-inch of dust on it.
Right.
It hasn't been used in a long time.
Years.
And it's like, do you see anything wrong here? Well, yeah, you don't have that stored correctly.
It's still got regulators on it.
Oh,
One
yeah.
of them still has pressure.
Always. And,
like it's still active.
Well, I mean, I don't see a whole lot of them on, but they're regulators on, bottles together, and you could tell it hasn't been used in a long time.
Right.
I see that broken quite a bit. In construction, they're using it, daily.
Regular.
Yeah. It's a little different there. All right, so
1910 section 253, and the letter of interpretation also applies to 1926 section 350.
Does both.
And when it is reasonably anticipated that gas will not be drawn from the cylinder within 24 hours, overnights included.
Yeah.
Nice. Have you ever worked, I don't know if you help companies get through OSHA citations, but if you do, or if you've heard of any of the people you train get busted for welding stuff, what were some of the things that OSHA was busting them for?
Actually, I've actually never had any of the folks I work with get citations based off of welding.
It's because you're a good teacher.
That's right. I tell you what, the things I've sat through Hooch's classes, though, they do stick pretty good, so it makes sense.
Yeah. They're listening and they're following it. Well, that's
right.
cool.
Now we did have. I did have a group of at a steel mill. They weren't welding; they were making steel. They were going all out.
Right.
They got popped for their carbon monoxide detector.
The
Oh,
detector?
wow.
Yeah, because the carbon monoxide detector went off, but they couldn't find a leak, so they turned off the carbon monoxide detector.
Just shut it off. I can't find the leak.
Yeah.
Just turn off the detector. I'm sick of hearing this thing tell me I'm getting poisoned to death. Just shut it off. Let me die in peace. That's terrible.
And the industrial hygienist that came out and conducted the inspection, she was actually able to find
Wow.
carbon monoxide.
Where was it coming from?
I do not know.
Oh, okay.
But when she did her air sampling, she was able to find carbon monoxide.
Oh, I
and the
gotcha.
carbon monoxide detector was actually disconnected.
Wow. AJ and I were talking about that on
Just the last podcast?
the last show we were doing airborne contaminants, and I had a 4-gas meter running in the plant, and my CO sensor was going off, and I had to hunt, and it took a long time, and it turned out to be an old gas-powered pressure washer that they would spray with, was spewing out bad amounts of CO. So it could be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I had some welders get busted on a site. I was on the very first OSHA welding citation I ever saw. OSHA asked them for, back then it was a material safety data sheet, on their welding rods, and they couldn't produce it.
So that would have to cover, though, everything. Just like James was talking about. There'd be the metal fumes and the flux.
So OSHA comes on site. Hey, where's your MSDSs for these welding rods? They couldn't produce them. Boom, they got popped.
Oof.
And I didn't even know you had to have safety data sheets on welding rods. But if it's
Aaron, I did not know that there was actually safety data sheets for metal, for the actual for the actual base metals that you're using. I was totally amazed.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Because we don't know what alloys are put together to create this stuff. So there's no telling what's inside those metals.
Yeah.
So if how do we get that? Do we go from the manufacturer of the metal? Go to their website?
Absolutely. And the reason I found out about it, I was talking about the steel mills. The guys at the steel mills were showing me the safety data sheets for the metals that they created, because their metals, their steel, and any other alloys that they created were from recycled materials. So they had to know
what went into that.
All the creative things that they put inside that batch to make that steel.
Have you ever been involved in any of the hex chrome standards, getting a client compliant with those?
So I volunteered for a heavy metal study years ago at one of the facilities I worked in.
Did you study Twisted Sister?
AC/DC?
and Anthrax? What?
Pantera?
Metallica?
Well, this was sponsored by the Department of Defense. They were trying to determine the exposure to heavy metals in the allied trades within the military. And so I volunteered one of our facilities to go through this study. And they brought in multiple industrial hygienists. And they were there for, I think it was either 3 or 4 days, just taking samples of just about every operation we were doing. On day 4, I get a call from their chief, and he says, "Stop. James, you need to just stop."
Oh, man.
Like, what are you talking about? We were we were cutting armored vehicles. So the material that go into making the armor on the vehicles, well, that's classified. So we don't know what it is.
Oh, sure.
But when they put those sensors, when they put those samplers on my people, they said that the chromium-6 levels were off the charts. And I don't care if you're doing it outside, James. You need to just stop. And so we did.
Wow. So, if that's the case, if you got a worker getting high results back above the permissible exposure limit of hexachrome, then what do you do? Just the standard, try to engineer it out, work practice control, limit time, and then eventually, if none of that works, throw some air purifying respirator with some kind of hexachrome filter on. How do you fix that?
So we bought these machines that provided a local exhaust, local exhaust ventilation system.
Mm-hmm.
And so we worked with those for a little while, and then finally, based on the cost associated with running the machinery and the amount of work we were able to get done, we just finally said, forget it. Ended up sending that stuff to a group that specialized in working with those high chromium related materials. So it was a lot cheaper to subcontract it to someone who already had the systems in place than it was for us to continue to do the job.
That makes sense.
So you do what my students always tell me when I ask them, all right, so what's a safe way to do this now that we know all the hazards? They say, don't do it.
Just don't do it.
Don't use a ladder. Don't work.
What's the best way to not fall off a ladder? Don't get on a ladder.
Yeah, that's the number one answer. There, it's like, it's the first time I heard that one.
Yeah.
But that's basically what you guys did on a professional level. You looked at it, you looked at the controls, and you said, we're just not going to do this.
Yeah.
I got clients pondering that right now. They keep getting these calls. They're welders, mechanical contractor. They keep getting these calls to weld inside confined spaces, permit required confined spaces, where they would have to wear SCBAs and all that. And the owner's like looking at it, and he's like looking at the money, that he could charge for that. But then he's looking at OSHA and the hazards and the PPE and just buying SCBAs. That's not cheap. And so he keeps going back and forth, and I tell him, look, that's your call. If you do it, we'll train your guys up in how to do it. But that's your call. Have you ever dealt with that, people welding inside of a permit required confined space?
So running, our guys didn't have to run, so these were pipe welders. They didn't have to run self-contained breathing apparatus, but we ran PAPRs, powered air purifying, as a backup, even though they did have the, you know what I'm talking about, the elephant trunk.
The local exhaust
elephant trunk ventilation system, the local exhaust ventilation systems that we could run from outside.
Nice. And what was the contaminant that they were worried about in that situation?
So actually lead.
Okay.
Ooh.
Some of the systems had actually been joined with lead. We weren't working on the lead, but there was the potential, since we were heating up the pipe, that the lead was actually, that it had it further down on a joint somewhere or in a plug somewhere.
Right.
Before we get too far out of it, James, I wanted to make sure I asked, because we'd like to cover a wide breadth of things for our listeners so they can follow along and take stuff back to where they work. One of the big things we haven't talked about for any of the welding requirements is training. So, I mean, what would be some of the big things you could shout out to any of the safety professionals listening to help them with their training for their welders? And depending, if you got specialized advice for each trade, go ahead, and I'd love to hear it.
Ooh.
Ooh.
What kind of?
So training. I've gone through. I would have to say that if it were something sanctioned by the American Welding Society, then that would be very acceptable training.
Now, would that cover all types of welding?
So they start off with the basic fundamentals and work them up to where they can actually become certified welders.
Okay.
And some of the trade schools, some of the technical schools actually use the same curriculum that the American Welding Society uses.
So that's good training for actual welding. I would imagine they have some kind of OSHA safety chapter in that. Have you ever seen any of that?
Actually, yes. And unfortunately, as we speak right now, it is not available. I was actually trying to pull it up off of their website last week and this week, but there is a complete section on, well, a complete section. There's multiple modules. There's about 6 or 8 modules just covering safety.
Nice.
Awesome.
That's good. Now, when you're doing training, are you just doing OSHA standards? What are you doing when you know, is it in a OSHA 10, OSHA 30? Do you have just a welding safety course? I mean, what kind of welding training are you doing right now?
So by the time I get the welders, they know how to weld.
Right.
They are experienced. So we'll start off with whether they're working general industry or construction, they're going to get the 10-hour. The supervisors will get the 30-hour, and then some of the foremen, some of the masters, they will go ahead and take the OSHA's Guide to Industrial Hygiene and the hazardous materials course.
You got some good clients who are investing in safety training.
Yeah. We usually don't get a call until somebody's like, hey, AJ, OSHA's here, and they're wondering, when was the last time you trained my guys about welding? And I'm like, I haven't talked to you in 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah, we do a lot of welding training as part of, you just try to get an hour in your OSHA 30s in the construction industry, stuff like that.
So they get to see a bunch of the OSHA standards for a bunch of different types, so we'll go over gas, stick, MIG, TIG. We'll try to hit a bunch of the different broad strokes, and that's all that guy gets.
And then I end up doing a lot of field training when we're doing our inspections, because when we see the violation, we would try to coach them what regulation this is violating and how to fix it and stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. If I had a client say, will you train my guys how to weld? I said, oh, no, you don't want me to train your folks how to weld because I don't know how to weld. Right. But, Aaron, I saw you had a welding safety class. Yeah, I could teach them how not to die welding, but not how to weld. You don't want me teaching them how to run a bead. It's just something I haven't picked up. So there's a difference there. Not everybody realized that because some companies feel, too, that because they're providing some kind of how to weld course, they think that's sufficient on welding safety, and if it doesn't contain welding safety in the curriculum, then it's not.
And then what was the just to reiterate, to bring it up again, James, what was the group that you said to get the welding training from that had both?
Oh, the American Welding Society.
The American Welding Society. So it'll teach them how to weld, and then it'll also teach them how not to die welding.
Exactly.
Heck yeah.
Cool. So, all right, we're wrapping it up. Believe it or not, an hour has flown by.
It does. It goes fast.
So, James, do you know why we are called the evil safety dudes?
I was going to ask about that. Is it because you're evil in that you enforce the standards, or is it because you're evil in that when you're enforcing the standards, you abuse people?
Yeah, there you go. I like that one better. It might not be the reason, but I like it.
Actually, it comes from the perception of workers towards safety, regardless of if we're coaches or cops. And we're coaches, by the way, but it's the perception. oh, here comes safety, you know.
Tell me what I'm doing wrong, safety guy.
You know,
thanks.
You know, like, why don't you get a real job, safety man? We're out here working for a living. All you want to do is mess with us.
Must be nice.
You know, oh, man, you won't let us work, and really we're there to make sure they don't die. But their perception of safety is that, we're a nuisance.
Yeah, we're evil. We're just there to cause trouble.
Evil safety guy is probably the nicest term that they have for us. I'm sure they say a lot worse things when we're not around. But do you get that at all? Do you experience that? James is here. The safety guy's in the room.
I gotta answer that for James. James is beloved. First of all, I would like to say, Aaron, how dare you for threatening that? James is beloved. No,
when
go ahead,
James busts people, they shake his hands.
They do. They
afterwards.
say thank you.
Yeah.
Right?
What do you think, James? You've ever encountered that where they just look at you as the evil safety guy?
That's why I would rather teach safety than be a safety manager, because I do not like being the policeman.
Yeah,
I've worked in those facilities where the boss would say, don't let James catch you doing that.
Right.
Yeah. What is that?
Yeah. That's messed up.
Right. Instead of the boss being the one going, hey, you're doing something wrong, fix it.
Yeah.
Then they're like, oh, you're not doing something wrong until James catches you. And then you're the bad guy instead of the company.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's not cool.
All right. So you already know. You already know the why we're called the evil safety dudes, So, yeah, you understand. You understand the plight of the safety man.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, it has been a complete honor and a privilege to have you on our show. You're a super smart dude. Your wealth of knowledge and experience was great. Hour flew by for me.
Oh, yeah.
So appreciate you coming on the show. And keep kicking butt out there and teaching people how not to die at work. I know our job is you don't get a lot of kudos for what we do, but just for you and the length that you've been doing it, the amount of lives you've saved and the injuries you prevented and allowing workers to go home and enjoy life because they're healthy. You make a difference for what you do. We don't feel like we do. We don't get to see it all the time because it's on the prevention side, but just keep being an evil safety dude, my friend.
All right. Hey, Aaron, I'm actually going to get a recording of what you just said and play it for my boss. I might do it.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Well, for AJ Hanscom and Aaron Iacino, we are the Evil Safety Dudes, and we will see you next time. Stay safe out there.